Tofu.goddess should just lock herself in a cupboard and never come out.
Did someone say my name? Hey everyone! So in today's video, I'm going to be making a response video to Vegan Gain's response video to my response video to him. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I would highly recommend go watching my previous video. I'll put a card for it up here and I will put a link for it down below. It'll provide some much needed context for this video, and as always, I recommend that you go watch Vegan Gain's video to ensure that you know that I am not taking anyone out of context. As always, I'm going to do my best to not misrepresent him because I'm interested in having an honest conversation, and misrepresenting someone is not productive. But as I know, not everyone is going to go do that. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this entire situation, I'll briefly summarize. This whole debacle started when an animal rights activist named Adriana accused a fellow animal rights activist, William, of sexual assault. Vegan Gains then made a video where he accused Adriana of lying, and his evidence for this was well-known sexual assault myths. So I made a response video to him debunking these harmful myths and misconceptions about sexual assault. Now, because Richard has some confusion about the point of my last videos, I'm going to state explicitly what my goals are for this one and what they are not. I am not interested in convincing Richard of anything at this point. He's made it pretty clear that he's not receptive to reason. I'm interested in educating and in clearing my name with those who are capable of open-mindedness and critical thought. 2. I'm interested in debunking the lies Richard told about me and survivors of sexual assault, including that the thesis of my other videos was believe all women no matter what, the myth that sexual assault survivors do not have conflicting stories, the myth that sexual assault survivors will always behave how you would expect them to behave, and more. Number 3, I'm interested in providing more in-depth information about the realities of sexual assault and sexual assault survivors. But as I don't want to make a video that's exactly the same as my previous video, I would highly recommend go watching it if you haven't already, because there's going to be a lot more information in there that I'm not going to repeat in this video.
She contradicted herself numerous times throughout her story, and she didn't provide any evidence for her claims whatsoever, even though she claims to have evidence, where William has done this sort of thing to other women. She claims William has raped other women, but she won't provide evidence for any of these claims. William, on the other hand, he was actually able to provide photographic and video evidence, strongly suggesting that they were having a normal consensual relationship during this time. And actually, the photo and video that I'm posting on the screen right now, this was taken after Adriana claims that William anally raped her.
It seems a bit convenient to me that Richard failed to include the clips of me addressing these points already. I've already talked about how it's well known that survivors of sexual assault can have conflicting stories. It's well known that sexual assault survivors do not always act like a victim, and that doesn't mean that they're lying about their sexual assault. I'm going to read some sections from a report submitted to the Department of Justice of Canada, and I realize that me just reading a document isn't the most enthralling content of all time, but I think this is so important. I want to make it clear that these myths are exactly that. They're myths, and just because it seems counterintuitive doesn't mean they aren't myths, and I think it will be more convincing if I read directly from this document. So it'll only be a couple minutes, but I think it's really important. While the justice system recognizes that there is no single ideal victim of sexual assault, social attitudes are nonetheless slow to change. Women who deviate from expected scripts are still treated by police and the courts with suspicion and skepticism about whether or not they were really sexually assaulted or whether or not they were to blame for what happened to them. Social expectations to conform to this stereotype of what real or ideal victims look like mean that women who are sexually assaulted are expected to do the following: offer physical and or verbal resistance to unwanted sex, express clear and explicit non-consent to unwanted sexual contact, discontinue contact with the person who has been inappropriate sexually or has assaulted them, and demonstrate perfect or near perfect recall, including a consistent and linear narrative of what happened. These are, of course, unrealistic expectations. They do not represent how most women who are sexually assaulted actually cope and respond. Some of the most common ways that victims react to sexual assault are precisely what people often have difficulty understanding. Women who experience sexual violence may not always be able to make decisions to protect themselves. In fact, they might freeze, not report or delay reporting, not remember aspects of the event, have blanks in memory, have inconsistencies in memory, struggle with decision-making, not say no clearly to unwanted sexual contact, exhibit no physical evidence of injury from a sexual assault, be unable to identify the perpetrator to the police, exhibit no apparent emotional expression following a sexual assault, provide what might appear to be inconsistent statements at different points in time, blame themselves for the assault, have a relationship with the perpetrator after the assault, deny or minimize the assault, recant the experience. But what might appear to be an inconsistency in the way a victim reacts or tells her story may actually be typical, predictable, and a normal way of responding to life-threatening events and coping with traumatic experiences. Many responses that seem inexplicable to those who are unfamiliar with normal trauma responses can be appreciated by understanding the brain's way of coping with and processing overwhelming psychological events. These reactions to sexual assault have been characterized as counterintuitive in some of the literature aimed at enhancing the understanding of those working within the criminal justice system. And while I'm here, I also just want to include this other quote from the document because I think it is so highly relevant to this situation with Adriana and William, and Richard in particular. People who are used to a sense of self-efficacy and personal power and agency find it difficult to imagine such circumstances. But women in intimate situations with men who they believe are trustworthy, exactly the situations where research has documented that the most sexual assaults take place, may feel disempowered because they are destabilized by the unexpected betrayal or cognitively restricted because of altered thinking capacity or physically restricted due to neurobiological responses. These complex reactions are often a hallmark of the context. I highly encourage everyone to continue reading that document. I'll put a link down below. It includes a lot more information on sexual assault survivors, and it goes a lot into the neuroscience of how the brain reacts to highly traumatic events such as sexual assault.
She is being deliberately dishonest and manipulative. So her video is pretty long, it's 30 minutes long, and really there's not really any need to go through the entire thing. She essentially just repeats the same argument over and over again. So I'm just going to focus on some of the more major criticisms she made.
This is just blatantly untrue. I make a wide variety of points that are included to, but not limited to, and I'm just gonna read off my laptop here. The intricacies of human behavior, especially in relation to trauma, why women often don't go to the police, why using the terms sexual abuse and rape interchangeably does not mean Adriana is lying, that a man helping a woman with their careers doesn't preclude him from being a rapist. I talk about the likelihood of being falsely accused of sexual assault, and more. Do these all sound like I was repeating myself? And spoiler, Richard focuses on the least significant things in my video, which I will get into later.
Yeah. So after I watched tofu.goddess's video, I left this comment. You can read it right here, but what's important is tofu.goddess's reply. So she replied, "I addressed everything you said in this comment in my video. I'm willing to have a discussion, but not about whether or not she's lying, because that's not the point of this video. And as I said in this video, I don't believe that's appropriate. I made this video to debunk the myths you promoted," and she means the myths I promoted about rape, supposedly, so I'm happy to have a discussion on this topic of sexual assault in general. So right here, she is admitting that her entire video is one big red herring. My video was about questioning the credibility of Adriana's claims and pointing out that we shouldn't just completely destroy someone's life, branding them a rapist, just because someone made a baseless accusation. She's admitting here in this comment that she's just trying to, expose myths about sexual assault. that has nothing to do with my video. So she's just creating a red herring to divert the whole conversation, and I think she's doing this so that she has an easy way to sort of validate and give credibility to Adriana's claims without actually providing any evidence. This is sort of a manipulation tactic to try and shame people into just believing Adriana, because if you don't believe Adriana, well then you're just supporting myths about rape. And she really shoots herself in the foot here, because every single argument that she makes, you have to come in with the assumption that Adriana was in fact raped. So for any of her arguments to even make any sense, you have to automatically assume that everything Adriana said was true.
I understand that the point of Richard's video was not to spread myths about sexual assault, but sadly, that's what he did. And so just because his video was about how Adriana is lying, that doesn't necessarily mean that my video must be about how she is telling the truth. Richard also conveniently did not include these clips from my video. So this does not mean that we believe women 110% no matter what. There's 0% chance they're lying, even in the face of conflicting evidence. Does not matter. No, that's not what I'm saying. Adriana, I'm not going to publicly speculate on whether or not I think she's telling the truth, because I don't actually know any of the people involved. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. And you know what? Neither does Richard. You know, I'm not out here looking to cancel someone. I'm looking to educate. And so Richard is either deliberately misrepresenting my position, or he didn't watch my whole video. You tell me which one is worse. What I think Richard is confused about here is that when he says Adriana has inconsistencies in her story, therefore she must be lying, and then I reply with, well, actually, it's well known that sexual assault survivors have inconsistencies in their story, therefore this doesn't prove she's lying. I think he's interpreting that as me saying, this means that I'm saying that she must be telling the truth. No, all I'm doing is debunking all his points that he's using to prove that she's lying, and I'm saying all of these pieces of evidence that you're providing can be explained away, and they don't prove that she's lying. And I think it's so dangerous to be promoting this idea that Adriana must be lying and basing that on myths and misconceptions about sexual assault, because when women are not believed, when they're assumed to be lying for things that are beyond their control, it makes them not want to come forward and report their sexual assault. And when women don't receive support when they do come forward, it can increase their likelihood of getting PTSD, or it can make the PTSD worse or extend for a longer period of time. So spreading these myths and misconceptions, it hurts people.
Then, days later, supposedly, she decided to get blackout drunk with the dude who raped her, and she had a grand old time that night going to different bars with her rapist. That story alone sounds crazy.
Again, I addressed this point in my previous video. Why won't Richard include any of these clips? Yeah, again, it's well known that victims of sexual assault do not always respond in a way that you would expect them to. There's plenty of literature on the topic. All Richard would have to do was go to Google Scholar and search sexual abuse victim behavior, and so much would come up.
William and her weren't staying alone. She was staying with two other friends, close friends of hers, and they won't corroborate her story. So, let's see, Adriana has no evidence for her claims. The only two people who were, at all involved in the situation won't corroborate her story, and it just doesn't make sense.
Is it possible that he was pressuring her and that he sexually abused her when they were alone together? That seems par the course to me, that typically you don't do these things in front of other people. So yeah, how could her friends have witnessed this behavior? And as I already mentioned, victims of sexual abuse don't always show that anything is wrong. So it's entirely possible that her friends wouldn't have noticed that anything was wrong with her because she wouldn't be giving any signs that anything had happened.
craft. But according to tofu.goddess, rape, sexual assault, it's the special crime where you are guilty until proven innocent. And maybe months or years down the line, after new evidence comes to light, after court cases and all that, if we made a mistake, we'll just say, oh no, it turns out you didn't rape the woman. Oh, sorry, we made a mistake. You're acting as if false rape accusations don't happen.
Richard needs to provide a timestamp for when I said this, because I have said that believe women just means believe that there's a possibility that they're telling the truth. Don't just assume that they're lying. Of course, if good evidence comes out that shows that a woman is lying, then I wouldn't believe her. But Richard has failed to provide any such evidence in this case.
You're acting as if false rape accusations don't happen, and you're also acting as if they can't be as harmful as the crime itself of rape. There are men who have been falsely accused of rape who have been harassed, shunned by all their friends, their property has been destroyed, they lost their jobs. There are even men who have been falsely accused of rape who have committed suicide over it and have even been murdered. Vigilantes have actually targeted men who have been falsely accused of rape and murdered them. So, being falsely accused of rape can be just as, if not more harmful than actually being raped.
Funny how Richard fails to play this clip of mine. This is just talking about being convicted and going to jail. What about the social repercussions of being falsely accused? Now, I just want to say that falsely accusing someone for your own benefit or out of revenge or whatever is terrible. This is a horrible, horrible act, and I really feel for anyone who's been falsely accused. It can affect friendships with family and friends, it can lead to ostracization from them, it can impact your professional life, and it can impact your own emotional and psychological well-being. This is something that's extremely serious, and it has to be taken seriously. There's something about this comment that he's made that just really rubs me the wrong way. Why are we even comparing the two? Why is this being made into a contest? When he said that it's better to be actually raped than falsely accused of sexual assault, the first thing that came to mind was that scene from 13 Reasons Why, season 2, I believe, where that teenage boy was horrifically sexually assaulted. I'm not going to describe it because even just watching a fictional depiction of that was scarring. If you know, you know. If you don't know and you want to know, you can look it up. Not only do sexual survivors get sexually assaulted, but they can also experience PTSD, depression, anxiety. They can be ostracized from friends and family in their community. They too can also suffer professional harm. They too can also be driven to suicide. Richard also doesn't mention the fact that sometimes when you are falsely accused of sexual assault, there are zero repercussions. An example would be the current president of the United States, Donald Trump. He has been accused of sexual misconduct by 20 different women, and yet he went on to become the president of the United States. One of those women was actually his ex-wife, who accused him of raping her. And yet, like I said, he went on to become the president of the United States. There's also the case of Amber Watt, where she reported her rape and the whole town turned against her and no one believed her and nothing happened to her rapists. Now, I'm not saying all this to make the crime of making a false report to sound any less egregious, because yes, it absolutely does have that potential to do serious harm. You're just never gonna hear me say, one is worse than the other, because realistically, if there's two people, one's been sexually assaulted and one's been falsely accused, and they've both been driven to suicide, at that point, what is even the point in talking about who has suffered more? I think what bothers me about this comment from Richard, and this is just me giving my personal opinion, so if you don't agree, that's fine, you don't have to agree. I'm just, like I said, this is my personal opinion. It just really sounds like he's trivializing the trauma that sexual abuse victims went through. Imagine saying that to someone. Imagine saying to someone who's been sexually assaulted, well, at least you weren't falsely accused, because that would be worse.
I understand the points that tofu.goddess is making. I didn't play the full clip, because of the interest of time, but in tofu.goddess's video, she mentioned that the police have to deal with rape victims in a unique way. They can't just interrogate them like, other victims of crime, because it's extremely traumatic. Their memory recall might not be so great. I understand that. I understand that this is a factor in judging these things.
So we are 14 minutes into his video and he is finally addressing one of my points.
But to say that, oh, the reason Adriana's story is inconsistent is because, she suffered a traumatic experience. The inconsistencies in her story go so far beyond that, and I'll give you an example here. So here's Adriana's original Facebook post on December 27th, where she first came out with this publicly, where she claims, allegedly William raped her. So you can read the first paragraph here, but the important point is this. She claims that on November 3rd, 2019, I was sexually abused by William Burkhardt. So she's giving one single specific date, and she is claiming that she was only sexually abused one time. She's also not calling it rape here, which is interesting, but she is claiming in her opening statement she was only sexually abused by William once on November 3rd. Well then, why in her story did she claim she was raped twice?
Do my eyes deceive me? Where in this so-called opening statement did she say she was only raped once and it was on November 3rd? Where in that statement is the word only?
She wrote this Facebook post down an entire month after this alleged incident happened. She had an entire month to process everything, deal with the emotions. This is also a written out response. She had all the time she needed to write out a response, think about things, read through it, make sure everything is consistent.
Again, even if there were inconsistencies in her story, as I've talked about at length already, this does not prove that she's lying. Richard needs to provide evidence that about after a month or so of being sexually assaulted, survivors have near perfect memory recall, and that their memory recall is even better when they're expressing themselves in a written format, because he's making claims with nothing to back up his claims. Richard later in the video brings up the fact that he didn't just talk to William and asked him about the situation and felt out his character. He also talked to William's girlfriend. Now, do I really have to explain again why this doesn't mean anything? Why doesn't Richard just talk to William's mom next time? That would be really good evidence. Bill Cosby's wife stood by him the entire time. Ted Bundy, his girlfriend, had no idea that he was a serial killer.
She mistakenly called William's girlfriend his wife. She's not even paying attention. She did no research. Multiple times in my video, I referred to his girlfriend Leah as his girlfriend. She mistakenly called William's girlfriend his wife. She's not even paying.
Okay. So no, I didn't watch Richard's videos half asleep and then just rolled out of bed in the morning and just recorded them without doing any research. If you must know what happened, I watched his videos, was making notes, and then in my notes that I was making, I didn't refer to William's girlfriend as wife or girlfriend. So I didn't have that in my notes. And then when I sit down to record my response videos, I don't watch the video. I just go off my notes. So I guess when I was recording, I didn't even notice I was doing this. I referred to her as his wife. And I noticed I made this mistake while I was editing my video, and I made a note to add a little asterisk thing to say, I meant to say his girlfriend, not his wife, but I guess I forgot. And by the time I exported the video, which for me on my computer it takes 15 minutes, I'd already exported it, and functionally saying girlfriend and wife are the same thing, so I didn't think it would matter. Apparently it does. Apparently this proves that I didn't do any research and that I just don't care. You know you're grasping at straws when you have to resort to pointing out mistakes in one's diction. Like, oh, she said that she was sexually assaulted on November 3rd, but then went on to say she was sexually assaulted on another day. Oh, she said that William had a wife, not a girlfriend. Clearly she's in the wrong. Or, oh, she used the term sexual abuse and rape interchangeably. This proves that she's lying. Like, come on. Also, please note that my channel is called the Tofu.goddess. The Tofu.goddess. And Richard, in his video title, didn't include the word the. I guess that means he just doesn't care. And please note that Richard said in his video that he wasn't going to be responding to all my points due to time constraints, yet he chooses to focus on this. Why wouldn't he address my points about why women wouldn't go to the police? Because in his original video, he said Adriana not wanting to go to the police in a foreign country proves that she's lying. Well, I addressed that, like why she might not want to go to the police and how this doesn't prove that she's lying. Why wouldn't you respond to that point, Richard?
So then I decided to give tofu.goddess a taste of her own medicine on Twitter. I accused her of rape, and I encouraged everyone to contact her friends, family, her place of work, tell them that she's a rapist. Doesn't matter if there's any evidence, we should just believe that she's a rapist because I made that accusation. Well, what do you think tofu.goddess did after that? Did she get the hint that maybe she was being ridiculous? Did she apologize for being so stupid? No, she blocked me. And then, of course, embarrassed about this, she complained about me on Twitter about how I'm being rude. And then people pointed out that, no, I'm not being rude. Vegan Gains is just making a very valid point that we can't just believe every accusation.
I blocked Richard not because he was making a point I couldn't possibly refute. I was never saying Adriana is absolutely telling the truth. I was just pointing out how his points don't prove she's lying. But also, the tone of this tweet is incredibly rude and disrespectful. Not only is it rude and disrespectful, but he's also mocking survivors of sexual assault who don't want to go to the police and whose only evidence is their word. By the way, if Richard chooses to respond to this video, which for the love of God, I hope he doesn't. I'm so tired of talking about this. But if he does choose to respond to this video, I'm going to predict that he's going to focus on this and he's going to say something along the lines of, wow, look how sensitive tofu.goddess is. She's too emotional. You can't believe anything she has to say because I chose to block him for just being rude and disrespectful. I don't know about you guys, but in my world, it's not okay to talk to people like this. Richard in his video then talks about how women can also be falsely accused, which is something I guess I didn't address directly. In the first 5 seconds of my last video, I talk about how abusers can be of any gender and sexual assault victims can be of any gender. I guess I didn't explicitly say that women can also be falsely accused, so fair enough. But yes, this is something I already knew. In fact, I have a personal friend of mine, a woman who was falsely accused of sexual assault, and believe it or not, but she still thinks Me Too is a good, necessary thing.
She hasn't talked to me, and I'd like it to stay that way. I think tofu.goddess should just lock herself in a cupboard and never come out.
I think it's also interesting that Richard says he can't respond to all my points due to time constraints, yet he still has the time to insult me. I would say next time, maybe less ad homs and more actual arguments. He also says in the video something to the effect of, "Don't talk to me or my son ever again." After he'd already shown that I had blocked him on Twitter. So I think me blocking him on Twitter means that I'm not interested in talking to him. So him saying that kind of sounds like that trope of, like, you're fired. You can't fire me because I quit. It's like a little sad. Now, in my previous video, I said that we as vegans in a vegan community have the duty to call out Richard's BS, and some people did. I'm not saying it's because of my call to action. I'm not going to claim to have that kind of influence over people, but nonetheless, some people made responses, and I want to just shout them out real quick. So first person I want to mention is my friend, Catherine Klein. She made a video that wasn't dedicated to this subject, but she included it a segment talking about this at the end of one of her videos. I'll leave a link for that down below. I also want to shout out That Peachy Vegan. She made a video sharing her own experiences about sexual assault. That was really brave of her, and I will play a clip of that for you.
So yes, a lot of rape scenarios don't have evidence. It is his word against hers, and if that's not going to stand up in a court, the least we can do is try and find a way to learn from it and to sort of make sure we don't do that. So, take note. If you're a guy or a girl in this situation who does go up to women or men and show them porn videos to try and get them in the mood when you haven't got a sexual relationship in the first place, maybe do register that as creepy behaviour. Just like if someone says no, just take it as no. Most of the time when girls say no, it's because they mean no. And if they don't, they'll come back. They will come back. But yeah, we do need to we do need to have a bigger conversation about this, I think, because it shouldn't be up for debate. It should be discussed. It's someone else's trauma, you know.
And lastly, I want to shout out Abba Ciel, Aizon Mazard. He made a video discussing how Richard was lying to his audience about this case with Adriana and William, and he discusses how Richard is probably the last person who should be talking about this. I'll play a clip of his video here.
She was cuddling on the couch with William.
The young woman is not cuddling up with the man in this picture. She is, in fact, sitting as far away from him on the couch as is humanly possible. And she doesn't look happy. She's not flirting with him. She's not cuddling up with him, right? She looks pissed off. Vegan Gains insists on describing this as her cuddling up with him. But what's even more telling is that Richard is implicitly lying to you because he pretends that she hasn't addressed this. She replies, explaining really what you can see in the photo itself. She's not cuddling up with him on the couch. It's just not true. This is an 18-year-old Mexican girl telling you directly she did consent to kissing. She didn't consent to vaginal sex. She didn't consent to anal sex. There are some guys in some cultures who take the attitude, oh, if you open the door a crack, I'm going to put my foot in the door and I'm going to push the door the rest of the way open. Okay? Well, if you do that, if that's how you play the game of love, you will end up in horrible situations like William that you will regret for the rest of your life if you're not a complete jackass, and that the woman will regret for the rest of her life. So don't do it. Don't take that attitude.
So I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting kind of tired, not just of recording this video, but of this subject in general. So for my conclusion, I'm sorry, but I'm just gonna read it off my laptop. Forgive me. In conclusion, I would say that Richard has built himself a pretty nice straw man. I hope that this video makes clear that his video about me was extremely misleading. I also hope the facts I presented in this video about sexual assault survivors resonates with anyone who is skeptical before. I hope this helps dispel some myths and misconceptions about sexual assault. I hope that we can all learn from something about this, about how to handle these types of situations in the future. And finally, for the love of God, I hope Richard drops this subject so I can stop talking about it. I would love to make a video on a different topic, and I'm sure you, my audience, would appreciate me talking about something else for a change. Hi, it's me from the future. I know, not my best video for me to just jump in like this, but I realized I forgot to also mention something that I think is important. In my previous video, the first one I made responding to Richard, I said that he made the claim that as a result of metoo, false sexual assault allegations are increasing. So I responded to him and I said, Richard, you need to provide evidence for this claim, because to just throw that out there without any kind of credible source is really so highly irresponsible. So I would say to Richard, if I was talking to him, of course, he's made it very clear I'm not to talk to him or his son ever again. I would say, where is the evidence? If it exists, please present it. If not, maybe you should retract that claim. And that's all I have to say about that. I've left some links in the description citing my sources and just some things for further reading. Don't forget to read that document that I mentioned in the beginning of my video. It's so informative. And that's all I have to say about that. I'll see you in the next one.